the YRs, the one hosting this, specifically Christopher Long, and Greg Catherine McDowell, without whom none of this would have happened the way it's happening now. I would also like to thank John Hancock for being our moderator tonight and the candidates for coming. Also, we are also accepting donations. All donations can be given in the bag, and we're also giving out t-shirts for donations. So if you want a nice, comfortable St. Louis and Republicans t-shirt and Republican red, we are giving those out tonight. All right. Without any further delay, our moderator tonight is John Hancock, who's a former state representative. He's the two-time Republican candidate for Secretary of State. He was the former Missouri Republican Executive Director and Chairman of the Missouri Republican Party. He is currently a political consultant and a host on Hancock and Kelly on KMOX Radio and Fox Television. Please join me in welcoming John Hancock.
You're going to meet our candidates here in just a second, and candidates, you'll be gratified to know that your opponents are going to have every minute of everything you say this evening on videotape. So this is running for office is a huge, huge commitment, and we often take for granted what these candidates go through. It is not easy to be a candidate for public office, especially these days. I don't imagine there's a whole lot of undecided voters in the room tonight. Maybe, perhaps, there are. One of these four is going to be the Republican nominee for state auditor, and we will support them, won't we? Yes. All right. Well, that's a very good first part. The way this will work, opening statements will be 90 seconds to 2 minutes. 2 minutes will be the cutoff. Closing statements will be 90 seconds to 2 minutes. 2 minutes will be the cutoff. Then we'll ask questions on a rotating basis, and the answer to each question will be given by each candidate. They will have 90 seconds exactly to answer, and once that time is expired, their answer will be completed. We're going to start this evening with our opening statements going from your left to your right, and we'll do the closing statements in the reverse order from your right to your left. Please welcome State Representative Paul Curtman.
Also, thank you to the YRs for putting this on. I think these forums are very good, because, especially in primaries, because I believe iron sharpeneth iron, and candidates can learn an awful lot from each other and from the people that they're talking to. My name is Paul Curtman. I am currently a state representative. I'm in my 8th year in Jefferson City right now. I served 10 years in the United States Marine Corps, 4 years active, 6 years reserve, came home, worked in finance, went to college, spoke up at a town hall meeting. It got some attention from the grassroots. Some of my friends and neighbors that had asked me to consider running for office. I prayed about it. I'm a Christian. I believe God can run my life better than I can. And after we got peace about it, knocked on 30,000 doors and wound up winning in a district everybody said a conservative couldn't win. I learned a lot over the last 8 years. I've learned that politicians are term limited, but bureaucrats aren't. And that's created a huge problem for us in Missouri, because a lot of these bureaucrats continually are the ones coming back decade after decade after decade asking for more money from the legislature, usually because they spent all the money we sent them the previous year. As the chairman of the Committee on Downsizing State Government, the Committee on Government Efficiency, I've had an opportunity to really put the screws to some of these bureaucrats, have a lot of hearings to go over 10 years worth of audits in some cases, and use that time and that opportunity to put together solutions so we can get out ahead of the problems that we're discovering in the audits. If the state auditor is not a leader, this is the most important attribute that any elected official can have. If they're not a leader, then that office is immediately just as wasteful as any bureaucracy that they're trying to watchdog over. So my name is Paul Curtman. You can go to paulcurtman.com and send me an email through that website. It goes right to my phone so I can be available and accessible to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Please welcome State Auditor candidate Saundra McDowell.
Thank you. Hear me okay? So I am running because I have the exact experience of the office, and I believe that office has a lot of problems. And so I'm going to start out with that, because that's what I'm going to talk about a lot tonight, are the problems in that office and what I can do to fix those. As well as the office, there's a lot of problems in Missouri, and I think that the auditor's office has a duty to do what they can to fix those problems as well. So like I said, I have the experience. I've already been prosecuting fraud with the state. I worked at the Attorney General's office as an Assistant Attorney General doing Medicaid fraud, leading auditors and investigators there, getting Medicaid providers who are overbilled billing the system or billing for services that weren't provided to pay back money, and if it was fraudulent, we prosecuted them, and a lot of them are spending time in jail currently. From there, when Secretary Ashcroft came into office, I was offered the job of Director of Enforcement for the Securities Division. There I led the entire enforcement section looking into securities fraud. So your investment advisors, your broker-dealers, people that are taking your investment funds and placing those in products, we audited them and investigated them. Again, made sure they were doing what they were supposed to be doing. If not, made them pay back money, fixed problems, and if it was fraudulent, prosecuted them. Again, I have put, with my investigations, I have literally put people in jail for the fraudulent acts that they have committed. You can look at those, the orders online on the Secretary of State's website. I've also brought back over $10 million of taxpayer funds and individual investment funds to Missouri and to Missourians. And so I have evidence that I've already been instrumental in helping Missouri. I want to continue to help Missouri with the State Auditor's Office. I'm an attorney. I'm a veteran. I was in the Air Force for 8 years, 6 years active duty, 2 years in the reserves. I was deployed after 9/11. I've seen a lot in my life, and I know there's a lot more that I'm going to see. I've already heard a lot of problems here in Missouri, a lot of corruption that I want to go in and fight, and I hope to talk about that more during the forum here. But thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you all taking the time to come and listen to us. Thank you.
Please welcome State Auditor candidate Kevin Roach.
Hi, my name is Kevin Roach. I have been traveling the state, and this is great to be in a forum here at home, finally. And when I was in YRs, we weren't really able to pull off something quite like this, so this is fantastic, and I'm really happy to be here. I'm a 7th generation Missourian, and a big theme in my family has been law enforcement and public service. My grandfather and 3 of his brothers were all police officers in St. Louis. My father, my uncle, and my cousin currently serves here in St. Louis County. And my father, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather were all U.S. Marines. So I mention that because that's pretty much how I was raised, from straightforward people who are strict and teach you the difference between right and wrong. And that's really what we need in our government right now. I got involved in conservative politics really in the 5th grade, putting out yard signs for a conservative guy running for Rockwood School Board who went on to the Missouri House, Alan Isett. And when I was in college, I started a pro-life organization in Missouri called Choose Life of Missouri, which is responsible for the Choose Life license plate in Missouri. And it wasn't easy. A couple of bureaucrats got in the way, and I took them to federal court. Jay Nixon was their attorney, beat him, in case anybody remembers that guy. And they appealed, and Chris Koster was the attorney on the appeal, and beat him too. So these are the best that the Democrats have to offer, and I've already got them, you know, in my rearview mirror. I've been traveling Missouri talking about the illusion of accountability, and it's something that I have repeated over and over again so that people hear the truth, that we have over 3,700 separate government entities in Missouri, and they're living off of your paycheck. We've got over 1,100 towns, 534 school districts, road and sewer districts, special taxing districts. We need to modernize the office because the state auditor now audits less than 100 of these government entities every year. So my theme is modernization. And if you can't tell, I'm conservative too.
Thank you, Kevin. That's Kevin Roach. Say hello to State Auditor candidate David Wasinger.
I too would like to thank the St. Louis Young Republicans. Wow, what a crowd. And John Hancock, thank you for your past service as chairman of the Missouri Republican Party. Now that is a job that doesn't give us enough thanks as John deserves. I too, as Kevin have, we've all traveled the state of Missouri as state auditor candidates. And there are 2 questions I'm asked primarily when I'm on the campaign trail. The first question is, are you a certified public accountant? The second question is, why in the world would you put yourself through this? So let me first answer the first question. Are you a certified public accountant? The reason people ask that question so frequently is for the past 50 or so years, go back to Kit Bond, This position has been held by a certified public accountant or an attorney. Voters look for that qualification. The Democratic nominee is a CPA, and it will be a campaign issue. I am the only certified public accountant among the Republican candidates. And I'm also an attorney, so I check both boxes that voters look for in terms of qualifications. The second question is, why in the world would you put yourself through this? And that requires some soul searching. And the answer to that is sitting in the front row of this room. I have 2 young sons, and I see a lot of young Republicans. I think if the culture of cronyism and corruption is not changed in Jefferson City, those 2 young boys you see sitting over there, Colleen and my boys, are not going to have the same opportunities that I had growing up, that John Hancock had growing up, that others in this room had growing up, and that's why I'm running to be your next state auditor. I am not from St. Louis. I am born and raised in Hannibal, Missouri. I went to Hannibal High School. I majored in accounting at Mizzou, and that's after I passed the CPA exam, and I have a career of uncovering taxpayer fraud we'll get into, but my goal is to restore trust in Missouri, and I look forward to talking to you about it tonight. Thank you.
I would like to see more bite in the auditor's office. I am a prosecutor by heart, and I plan to change the office in a way that as I'm doing the audits and investigations, and I have CPAs under me that will be doing these audits and investigations, but I will be leading them as the auditor, as the director of enforcement. That's what I did. Auditors and investigators came to me. I took a big picture sense of looking at these cases to decide what to do with them. What I plan to have my auditors and investigators do is take these audits as if we were going to litigation. So we're going to make sure that everything that we bring in during an auditor investigation is ironclad, that it's going to get past any kind of hearsay objections, any kind of relevance objections, any foundation issues, things that you look for when you're an attorney and you're going to take a case that possibly could go to litigation because we might find fraud, we might find some wrongdoing there. I want to be able to get all of that done beforehand, and then when we're done with the audit, whatever we find, if it is something that's wrong, we need to refer that over somewhere for someone else to prosecute that. We've already got the file here that we can just hand over to the Attorney General's office, or we can just hand over to the feds, and they can take that case and they can prosecute it. So that's one of the main things I will change. The thing that I will keep is I'll keep the people there. I plan to train them. I plan on anyone that wants to stay with me and wants to get on board with my vision and what I want to do with the office. I plan to keep them, get them trained, get them out to the counties, being able to help and educate the counties more so than what they're doing. But there's hey, I like that. That's good. Is that a gavel? I like it.
All right, one thing to keep, one thing to change. Well, let me tell you how I got to my answer. I've got a bachelor's degree in economics from Washington University and an MBA from the George Herbert Walker School of Business, where I studied forensic accounting and the investigation of financial fraud. One thing to change is that the state auditor's office is required by law to be audited itself every 2 years. It hasn't happened in 3. So one of the first things I'm going to do is bring in an independent, a tough, independent auditor to go through that office. Because you've got 115 people working there spending $8 million a year. So, and they're producing less than 100 audits per year. So we've got a hard question to answer, which is what is going on in that office? There's going to be a lot of things that we're going to find out through that audit. You can't ask anybody to do anything that you're not willing to do yourself. So with the results of that audit, that will tell us exactly the things that we need to change. But we need to modernize the office because 97% of government entities are not being audited. Some have never been audited, and they're playing the odds that they never will be audited. And this is all contributing to the illusion of accountability. You know, state auditors, in order to look more productive than the last one, audit smaller entities than the big ones. You've got some TDDs that have a budget of 150,000. MSD's budget, 650 million.
I ask the candidates to talk directly into the microphone if they can. Next will be David Wasinger. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you, John. At the outset, I mentioned my theme is to restore trust in Missouri, so these two young men will want to stay here and other future generations will stay in Missouri. Right now, we have a liberal insider that was not elected to the office serving as state auditor. Remember, Tom Schweik passed away. I'm a conservative outsider. Okay? One of the first things I will do is post a banner up that says, restore trust in Missouri. And you walk through the acronym TRUST. So let's just go through it. T, we need more transparency in state government so we know what's going on. That can be done. Ohio has something called Ohio Checkbook. You can get a portal and immediately find out where all of your tax dollars are being spent. Missouri needs to adopt something like that. R, we need to root out fraud, waste, and corruption. The U in trust. This is not about the career politicians. It's not about the insiders. It's not about the lobbyists. This office is about you, the Missouri taxpayers. Not about me, not about the insiders. That's the U. The S is spending. We now have a $28 billion budget in the state of Missouri that needs to be audited and monitored, so we need to monitor our spending. And lastly, technology. We need to upgrade technology audits so they're not hacked. If we accomplish those 5 elements and replace the current state auditor with a conservative outsider, we'll restore trust in Missouri. Thank you.
You got all 5 of those letters in there. All right, Kevin Roach, we're going to start question 2.
Can I answer this question also?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Sorry about that.
One thing to change, one thing to keep. I'll start off with one thing to keep. I don't feel like I can say one thing that I'm going to keep right now, because I think that to something that some of the other candidates have spoken to, I think whoever goes in there is going to have kind of a changeover of command ceremony, so to speak. That's just a little bit of military terminology. And they're going to have to assess whether or not they want to keep the people. They're going to have to assess whether or not they want to keep some of the process that they're currently using. 2 things that I'd like to change, though. Kevin spoke to this, David spoke to this. We do need more technology. I specifically would like to be a better advocate for blockchain technology. It offers a much tighter form of accountability, and other states are already moving in this direction. I've already had conversations with the Office of Administration about it. They would really like to see legislation that gives permission in the state of Missouri for us to at least start exploring that, how we can use it to make us more accountable. But the other thing is just in terms of leadership. We have a $28 billion budget. And every year when the House of Representatives goes through the Budget Committee, at the bottom of every one of those pages, you might see a little asterisk basically that says that there's been an audit of the department or agency that's currently there asking for more money. The state auditor's office needs to be part of that budget hearing, because when a bureaucrat comes and asks for more money, I would really like for the state auditor's office to be there to speak up on behalf of the audit and say, no, they might not need as much money as they're asking for. Here's what our audit looked like. This is where leadership comes in. And you don't need a whole bunch of initials behind your name to figure that out. So I would like to bring that to the office. Thank you.
Great. All right. You guys are doing great. Next question. This one will begin with Kevin Roach. The Democratic incumbent, Nicole Galloway, is a certified public accountant and has highlighted that as one of her qualifications. I imagine for one of you that's a very important attribute, and for 3 of you it's not so much. Why is being a certified public accountant either an essential attribute for a candidate, or why is it not, Kevin?
Essential or not, you know, the last time that the state auditor's office was modernized was by Kit Bond, but that was 2 years after Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. It's coming up on 49 years ago on July 20th. He was not a CPA, but he was an adept business leader who knew what we needed in 1971. So now we're coming up on 2019, and the state auditor's office is still doing the job the exact same way, leaving 97% of government entities unaudited. Anyone who talks about the $28 billion state budget is perpetuating the illusion of accountability in Missouri, because you have all of the other government entities spending money too. And how much is that? I think it's another $22 billion. I think we spend in Missouri $50 billion a year on government. No one can tell me that I'm wrong, because no one in Missouri's history has ever added up all the budgets of all the government entities to tell us exactly what letters or anything after your name can tell you that, because they don't put that on the CPA exam. So I hope that answered the question. The biggest qualification, the most important qualification, is not being blind to the problems we have in Missouri.
Thank you, Kevin. David Wasinger.
Thank you, John. I mentioned at the outset, this position, since the time of Kit Bond, you can run through auditor after auditor after auditor for close to the last 50 years. The electorate wants someone qualified for this position because it is a job. You have some very high-end professionals that have been there for a long time, and Kit Bond was an attorney. You go through the roster. Claire McCaskill, she was an attorney. Nicole Galloway is a CPA. Susan Monte was a CPA and attorney. The voters, Nicole Galloway is a CPA. If you walk into the state capitol or look at her campaign literature, CPA will be a huge campaign issue if you do not nominate a CPA as your nominee. And it's important because the reason voters see that as important is the office is comprised of about 115 people. Frankly, the current state auditor has stacked that on the high end with a bunch of political insiders. But a good chunk of the staff is professional staff that are going to look to you and see whether or not you know the rules, the generally accepted auditing principles. They're going to look to you and see whether or not you're a CPA, as to whether or not you have some knowledge. I have a proven record in running my business of uncovering taxpayer fraud. As some of you may know, after the financial crisis, I took on the Wall Street banks and worked with the U.S. Attorney's Office up in New York, and we ended up recovering over $18 billion in taxpayer fraud.
And perhaps we can hear more about that.
You're tough with that gavel, John. You're tough.
Paul Curtman, you have 90 seconds.
Okay, thank you. I think being a CPA, having an education, I think that's great. I think that can aid and be beneficial. But let me tell you something. Our current auditor is a CPA. She's also a certified fraud examiner, but I don't think it's done anything to help make her honest. I got a whole list of it. I wish I had more than 90 seconds here. Last November, the Missouri Times put out an article talking about how she basically repackaged an audit that Tom Schweik put together, only she redacted information that should have been available to the public, because by redacting information related to a company called Remy, it actually helps protect a leftist agenda. So being a CPA hasn't done anything to make her honest or offer more information to the people of our state. A few weeks ago, she put out a press release talking about all the welfare reform that we need. Well, I really wish she would have been around for the last 4 years, because in the Missouri State House, we've been working on welfare reform. And had we had the leadership of the state auditor, CPA or not, the state auditor can speak with authority to this stuff. But instead, she waits till the legislature is out of session, puts out a press release, probably because it plays well in campaigns. Greene County probably needs an audit. Statutes right now say that if the people ask for an audit, the people have to pay for it.
The CPA does not hurt me at all. Those letters after your name mean something, and there's a lot of education behind those letters. CPAs do not have near the education that an attorney does, and David would agree with me on that. As an attorney, you go through 3 grueling years of being in books and computers, of case law, of practicing in front of other judges, trial practice, deposition training, moot court. It's like basic training all over again, really, but it's 3 years long. And so those letters mean something. And to be the attorney as the auditor also means something, because, as I think mentioned before, some of our best auditors have been attorneys. Kit Bond, John Ashcroft, Tom Schweik, who was going to run for governor as well. They were all attorneys, and they were very good auditors. And the reason why is because as an attorney, you have that big picture sense to be able to look at these cases and decide what to do with it. You don't need to be a CPA. In fact, being a CPA, I think, bogs you down. You get caught up in the minute details of these audits or the spreadsheets and things that you're looking at, and you don't need to do that. You have people that do that for you. Why in the world would the state auditor, who doesn't go out in the field and do the audits himself, why do they need to be a CPA? I don't think they do. I think they need to be an attorney, and I think I'm your perfect candidate to go against Nicole Galloway and defeat her.
Very good. We will begin this series of questions with David Wasinger, or this question. A proposal called Clean Missouri is going to be on the ballot in November. Do you support it? Do you oppose it? Why? David Wasinger, you have 90 seconds.
If this audience, which it sounds as though they don't know about Clean Missouri, you need to know about it. This auditor race, if Clean Missouri passes, maybe have a longer-term impact on the state of Missouri than the U.S. Senate race, which is a huge deal for this country. Clean Missouri is an initiative being funded by George Soros and being backed by Barack Obama and Eric Holder to change the complexion of the state of Missouri. What you're going to see are some ethics reforms, which frankly I am in favor of, about stopping legislators from getting
nonpartisan and non-political. You should be auditing everyone consistently with no favoritism, no bias. And I believe that if redistricting power goes to the state auditor's office, that it does immediately politicize that office, no matter who's in it, a Republican or Democrat. And I don't think any of us would want either side to have sole power to redistrict our state however they see fit. And I'm absolutely shocked with some of the Republicans that are supporting Clean Missouri. I would encourage you to look into that, because I don't see how you can be a Republican and support redistricting going to the auditor's office. But with the other things too, I know everyone's saying that it may sound good with limiting lobbyist gifts, limiting the amount of time between when you are a politician to when you can become a lobbyist, more campaign contribution limits. My concern is that I'm definitely for limited government, and I'm for transparency, but it's what happens when you continue to put more rules and regulations is that it actually has the opposite effect. And so with what we've seen with the campaign contribution limits that were just passed, well, now you've got 30% increase in PACs set up where we don't even know where money's coming from now, because now we have $2,600 contribution limits. I want to know where that money's coming from. I want to know, I think it should be gavel time.
Kevin Roach, you have 90 seconds.
Be to get the legislature involved to actually help define the policy. When the Constitution's not clear on policy, when it's not explicit as to what exactly is supposed to happen, then that opens up room for the state legislature to come in, represent the people, and talk about how it needs to be done. So I think that the best way to make sure that it's implemented is to make sure that the legislature's involved. That way this issue does find a way back to the people, at least to some degree.
Great. Thank you. Saundra McDowell, you have 90 seconds.
There's two things I plan to do. First, I will do whatever I can to get it back out of the hands of the auditor's office. I don't think that's the proper place for it, and I think it's being squeezed into this initiative without even people's knowledge. Now, I agree that the voters should make the decision on things, but I think this is a deception to the voters. And so that will be the first thing I will look at, is to try to get it out of the auditor's office. But if it isn't to leave the auditor's office, or at least while I'm there, while it's there, I will set up some in-house rules and regulations on how to follow this new law. And one of those would be to bring someone from the opposite party line over to make that initial list of the possible developers, because I just think that things should be fair, and I don't think any side should be able to make the entire list of who the developer is. So if you bring someone from the opposite party over to come up with that list, then we send it over to the legislator for them to veto the 1/3 or whatever the amount is, and then they send it back, and then you do pick a lottery, whatever that means. If you're picking from a hat or something, at least all those names are coming from both parties and not just the one. So that would be something that I would look at doing, and that may change as things go on once I get in office and see what might be a better way to do it, but that's my initial thoughts on it. Thanks.
Great. Kevin Roach, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you. Well, the first thing I'm going to do, if this gets shifted onto the state auditor's office, is I'm going to be meeting with the Attorney General of Missouri, whoever that may be at the time, because the Missouri Constitution says no duty shall be imposed onto the state auditor that does not relate to auditing government expenses and receipts. So redistricting will be looking at the Constitution and our state laws as I work for you in office. So these documents are going to be very important to me, and that is why I'm going to make an issue out of these two conflicting parts, because I read the Constitution and I know the state law, and I'm going to make an issue out of that.
Thank you, Kevin. David Wasinger, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you, John. Again, if you have not researched Clean Missouri, I would strongly recommend you do so. Think about this. The elections typically fall under the umbrella of the Secretary of State. Okay, they control the elections. Now, why would Barack Obama and George Soros want this in the state auditor's office? How many Democratic state office holders are there now? One. State auditor. Why do they want redistricting in charge in the state auditor's office? Because they want a liberal Democrat in charge of redistricting in 2020. I cannot emphasize how important this issue is in terms of longer-term impact for the state of Missouri. If it passes, John, you're left, if these folks and the Missourians pass Clean Missouri, and I am elected state auditor, there is a process that I will then be required to follow to handle redistricting. That process, frankly, is relatively complex, so I will hit the highlights. The state auditor is required to select 3 demographers. So a demographer is someone that, you know, draws the maps. The state auditor then is supposed to work with the legislature and the parties to select, kind of come to an agreement as to which of these 3 auditors, or I'm sorry, not auditors, demographers should draw the map. If you have a liberal auditor in there, I can promise you there will be no agreement if she ends up selecting the demographer. And so what I will avoid happening is my hometown of Hannibal, Missouri, is not going to have an octopus and a representative from the city of St. Louis representing him.
All right. No occupier. We're going to deal with a couple of political philosophy right now. And we're going to start with Saundra McDowell. Living or dead, which conservative do you consider yourself most closely aligned with? You have 90 seconds.
That's hard because I almost look at it like that would be my mentor or someone that I would look up to, because I think you should position yourself with people that you want to be like. My first thought is to go to Ronald Reagan. I read his bio, I've read a lot of books on him, and I agreed with most everything that he did while in office. I think he came in during a very tough time, and I was very young at that age, so I remember very little, but I've heard a lot about it and read a lot of history on it, and I think that he had a lot to deal with, and I liken myself to him because I think coming into the auditor's office, I too will have a lot to deal with in cleaning up Missouri and cleaning up the auditor's office, and so I hope that I can be as wise and as I guess as good at the job as what I think that he was. So that would be my first pick.
You know, I knew Ronald Reagan.
Conservative, live or dead? What are you?
Kevin Roach.
Well, I'll talk to you this evening about a conservative that I miss, and that's Phyllis Schlafly. When I ran for alderman in Baldwin, which is just, you know, a couple of municipalities down Manchester Road, she endorsed me in my run for alderman 3 years ago. And I was only one of 9 candidates that year to receive her endorsement, a list that I shared with other congressmen and state Supreme Court judges across our country. When I started Choose Life in Missouri, she was very helpful. I asked her for some money. She said she'd make some phone calls for me, and so she was very helpful in that. And I only have one endorsement in the race for Missouri State Auditor, and that's Andy Schlafly, her son, who's an attorney. And her other son, Bruce Schlafly, MD, has been generous to contribute to my campaign. And she was the first conservative to endorse Donald Trump for U.S. president. And I thought about that, and I realized, well, I got her endorsement before Donald Trump did. That's kind of funny. So she's the story of one person who can make a difference. And I'm going to be one person who can make a difference as your next Missouri State Auditor.
David Wasinger, you have 90 seconds.
I have the statue of one president in my office. One president is Ronald Reagan. He sits on my mantelpiece. So Ronald Reagan would be my president, but I will tell you what, with the job that Donald Trump is doing in Washington, D.C., If he continues these reforms and the good job that he's doing right now, if he does this for another 4 to 8 years, he may be right next to Ronald Reagan on my bookshelf. I think Donald Trump is taking some much-needed reforms to Washington, D.C., and he's restoring trust in Washington, D.C. The tactics and ideas that Donald Trump is bringing to Washington, D.C., I want to bring those same refreshing ideas that Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump brought to Washington, D.C. I am not part of the establishment. I think Jefferson City needs to be changed. I think it's filled with cronyism, corruption. I think you've got a lot of career politicians, insiders, and lobbyists. I think if you take the ideals of Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump, I think you can restore trust in the state of Missouri.
It's going to take a very, very talented sculptor to get that before. Paul Curtman.
There's a lot of good attributes from several presidents that I really appreciate. Reagan, for the same reasons that my fellow candidates mentioned. Jefferson, because the principles that he articulated in the Declaration of Independence gave America our mission. In the second paragraph, that we're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. I mean, that changed the entire world to consider the fact that government would be created just to help keep people free. I like Trump, not a CPA, not an attorney. He's a leader, and he's got a lot of courage. And I think he's accomplished more of his campaign promises earlier in his career than any other president probably ever has. And I think that's really admirable. But I'm also a big fan of Calvin Coolidge, Silent Cal, probably the exact opposite of Donald Trump. But this guy was a real philosophical conservative who knew how to lead in a way that actually shrunk the size of government, not just reduced the increase in spending, actually shrunk it back. So there's 4 of them there that I just couldn't leave them. I just couldn't just pick one. Sorry.
Also on political philosophy, this one's going to hurt a little bit. And we'll start with Kevin Roach. Recently, Missouri's Governor Greitens resigned from office. Should he have resigned? Was he railroaded? Or do you think the legislature should have impeached him?
Let's see. So there's three questions in one. You've got.
You have 90 seconds.
Well,
I thought this would be a fairly illuminating question.
well, there's three questions. Should he have
resigned?
Should he resign?
Was he railroaded?
Was he railroaded?
And should he have been impeached?
Okay. Thanks for the question, by the way. I would say, first of all, I do not have as much information on the case as Jay Barnes, who was chairing the House Investigative Committee. I don't have as much information on the issues as Governor Greitens had, certain things that he knew, okay? And there's a myriad of other variables of people who were involved in that whole thing. So should he have resigned? That's his personal choice. So he's working with the information that he knows of what happened and who's saying what and who did what and all these different things. So I'm going to leave that for him. Was he railroaded? I don't know. Because unlike everybody else up here, I've never had an office in Jefferson City. I've never been appointed anything. I don't owe anyone anything. So I don't know who all were the influencers on the issue. And some of them, from what I hear, I don't want to meet them. And should he have been impeached? I don't know, because some of the things that the Special Investigative Committee was researching has not been released. You can't read everything in the newspaper. So there are people who are knowledgeable on the issue and have confidential information, probably better answer that question, but probably legally prohibited from doing so.
David Wasinger, you have 90 seconds.
I will tell you, as John knows, we know a lot of Republicans. I did not know Governor Greitens. He kind of came out of nowhere. With that said, frankly, I liked a lot of the ideas he was trying to implement in Jefferson City. I liked a lot of the reforms he was trying to implement. Obviously, there were some issues he had that none of us were probably aware of at the time he was elected. Those issues, I think, were certainly issues that caused a lot of people to step back, particularly when you run on a family values platform. With that said, I think that is a decision as to whether or not he should resign. That is not for me to say. That was a decision that he made. He elected to resign, whether it's for his family or for other reasons. My goal at this point is to look forward and not backward as to Governor Greitens. I will tell you that I think the manner in which he did it, he probably would regret some of the manner in which he did it, but the results he was trying to accomplish in terms of shaking up Jefferson City and shaking up the establishment in Jefferson City, I was in favor of a lot of those. I did not know him, and I did not know if the tactics or Trump has kind of broadened his base where he's taken over the Republican Party. Governor Greitens, in my mind, probably didn't seem to broaden his base. I'm not quite sure why that was. Maybe it was because of the way he didn't. Trump, on the other hand, I would follow Donald Trump's lead, where I would get my small group of supporters and broaden that base, and I don't think Governor Greitens did that.
Well, Curtman, you have 90 seconds.
Yeah, I'll try to do this in 90 seconds. Should he have resigned? Maybe, maybe not. Should he have been impeached? Maybe, maybe not. I had the opportunity. I'm the chairman of the Conservative Caucus in the House of Representatives. Myself and our vice chairman actually went and had a meeting with then Governor Greitens in the governor's office. And what we told him was we're going to vote however the facts tell us to vote. Because facts are really important because the stakes are so high because literally the leadership of our entire state, the Republican Party, is on the line. The legislature wanted to call us all back in for a special session. They had a petition passed around. I didn't sign the letter. I was one of maybe 6 people that didn't sign the letter because we didn't know what we were coming back in for. We didn't know what we were coming back in for. There were so many people. I don't even think I'm frustrated because this whole thing, I want you to know that I am. Because what happened, some things that happened were just outright wrong. I'm willing to bet that if we find out where that $120,000 came from that went to Al Watkins, I'm willing to bet that the whole picture begins to suddenly come into focus and be much more clear. There are people who are part of this story now who never should have been part of the story, and for legislators like me who are being forced to possibly vote on impeachment, it muddied up the waters and just really, really disrupted everything. And so I'm really hopeful. The Speaker of the House had made a commitment that we're going to really try to find out where that money came from, because when you have people floating money to try to undo elected representation, we better find out where it is, because if we don't, then that means all of our elected leadership is on the menu. And we have to make sure that we are accountable for when these types of things happen so we can actually execute justice when we need to. So should he have resigned? Maybe, maybe not. Should he have been impeached? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know anything.
Should he have resigned? Yes. And the reason I believe that is because that is what was best for Missouri. I believe President Nixon did the same thing. We needed to heal. We needed to move on. Missouri was. People were mad. I don't care if you were supporting Greitens or anti-Greitens. Everyone is mad about it. And as long as it goes on, the more it's drawn out, the madder people get and the longer it takes for us to heal from it. And so, yes, I do think it was the best decision. I respect his decision, and I'm glad that we have a governor that I believe will continue to move Missouri forward in the direction it needs to go. Was he railroaded? I don't know, because I have an issue that once he resigned, they dropped everything. I want them to continue their investigation and come out with whatever they were going to do, but I guess that was the deal that was made. But that kind of shows me that maybe there was something else going on there. So again, I don't know if he was railroaded, but I don't like what happened with that deal. Should he be impeached? I don't think that that's really up to me. That's up to the jurists that would have been selected during the impeachment proceedings. I think it looked like, from reading the same things that you all read, Facebook or news on the direction that our legislators were going, was that they were going towards impeachment. Would he have actually been impeached? I don't know. Again, like I said, it was up to the jurists. Don't know what they would have decided. They may have decided that he shouldn't be impeached, but we'll never know that because we didn't go that route. So, and I'm thankful for that, actually.
We're going to start this with
the greatest waste of taxpayer dollars occurs probably in the health and human services field, simply because we have a $28 billion budget. A very large chunk of that, if you were to isolate one area, would be the healthcare area. You've got Medicare, you've got Medicaid, and you have a lot of those issues. So that would probably be the biggest area of waste and fraud, simply because that comprises such a large part of the state budget and the federal budget. But I'll tell you, fraud is epidemic throughout. Once you have government in play, involved in anything, you have a lot of fraud, waste, and corruption. And it occurs, John had mentioned I would have time to talk, and I'll tell you about it. Once you have government involved in any process, whether it's underwriting mortgages with Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, I will tell you that you ask in the state government, in the federal government, after the financial crisis took place, I was contacted by the head of underwriting for Countrywide Home Loans, who was selling billions and billions and billions of dollars in loans to the federal government, FHA, VA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. We ended up working with the U.S. Attorney's Office up in New York. It was the largest taxpayer fraud case, I believe, in the history of the United States. In a very, very contentious case in which we ended closing arguments, Countrywide had over 40 lawyers in the courtroom. The U.S. Attorney's Office had over 35 lawyers in the courtroom. We ended up holding the Wall Street banks accountable, recovered over $18 billion in taxpayer fraud. So fraud is epidemic.
Sure. I think our Medicaid programs, certainly. We have a lot of metrics when we're measuring how many dollars are being pushed into each bureaucracy. So when people come to the Appropriations Committee, they ask for more money because they spent all the money we sent them last year, and that's like, in a lot of cases, not all, but that's kind of the measuring stick. What we're not doing is we're not applying metrics to the value that each taxpayer dollar is being sent as it's going out into the economy or going out into one of the state obligations. That's a real problem. I have a lady in my district. We had a huge issue trying to get her the Medicaid benefits that she was entitled to because she had applied over and over and over again, and she kept getting different responses from whoever was answering the phone for her. Yeah, we got your application. Yeah, we got it, but we lost it. We got it, but you misspelled a word. You got to fix that. 12 times that she filed this. So I think that we're wasting a lot of money because we're highly inefficient. We're not measuring the customer service, so to speak, to the Missouri taxpayers. I had a lady from Illinois call my office, and she asked how she can get Medicaid benefits. I don't know why she called me, but she did. She called back 3 times, so finally we gave her the number to the fraud hotline, and we just told her, call this number, tell them what you want to do, they'll take care of you. But there's a lot of waste inside that particular office. There's a lot of waste inside that particular office with one of the largest spends in the entire state, and these bureaucracies need to be held accountable for this. And the state legislature, this is why we need to have a state auditor who works with the state legislature to help put things in legislation like the metrics that we need to make sure that we're measuring the value of each dollar.
Saundra, McDowell, you have 90 seconds.
Greatest waste of taxpayer money is there are a lot of funds set up across the state agencies, and I know this because I worked for some of the state agencies, and there's over 1,000 of these funds that are set up, and they're set up for specific purposes with each agency. Like with Secretary of State's office, they have the Investor Education and Protection Fund, so that money is taxpayer money that comes back into that agency for a lot of different purposes. Sometimes it's because we did a consent order or a settlement with someone and they paid a civil penalty. Sometimes it's coming from other ways, but it's always money based off of setup. To my knowledge, they have never been audited by the state auditor or any other auditor, but there's a lot of money sitting in these funds as well, and I talked to some state reps that also have concerns with it. My concerns are that because it hasn't been audited, we don't know how they're using the money. We don't know if they're using it for the stated purposes or if they're using it for things they shouldn't be using it for. I think that we need to audit it and make sure it's being used appropriately and efficiently, and if not, maybe we can work with the legislator or those state agencies and get that money over to places where we could utilize it better. We've got a lot of problems in Missouri with our roads and our schools that money could be used for if it's not needed in the funds that it's there. And the state reps that I talked to said that there's over $1 billion sitting in these funds not being used. And so to me, that is a waste of taxpayer funds that could be used in our budget for better purposes.
All right. Roach, you have 90 seconds.
No one can really honestly answer the question of where the waste is because 97% of government entities in Missouri are not audited. That could be $22 billion a year. You know, we've got 534 school districts in Missouri, and appointed Nicole Galloway audited 0 in 2017. We have over 3,700 separate government entities in Missouri. Letters out that remind all the government entities that you are under the jurisdiction of the state auditor, and you could be audited at any point at any time. And if there's a knock on your door, it's probably not Publishers Clearinghouse.
We'll begin this question with Paul Curtman. What's an appropriate goal for the number of audits to be completed each year by the Missouri State Auditor?
The appropriate goal for the number of audits? Okay, I'm a believer in value. In other words, sometimes people just look for the number of bills they filed. When I first got elected to the House of Representatives, a lot of us were told, pass a bill to name a bridge. Because then you're doing something. You can go back home and talk about stuff you're doing. I've never once introduced a bill to name a bridge or to give us a new butterfly or anything like that. I think the value here is making sure that we're actually putting the resources of the state auditor's office into the audits that actually offer the most value to the people of our state. That might be a measurement in terms of quantity of dollars. There's a few different types of audits that a state auditor can use: a financial audit, a process audit, and a performance audit. You might be able to do a performance audit between 4 different bureaucracies and how they value to our people.
All right. That's a great answer and a lousy question. So let's talk about how best to prioritize the office, Saundra McDowell, as Paul just did.
Well, my goal is to audit every county that's under my jurisdiction at least once during the 4 years that I'm the state auditor. I think that there will be, like we've all talked about, problems in the auditor's office when I get in there. I know from talking to a lot of local elected officials that they've had problems with the auditors coming out, doing the audits, that they're not educated, they're not trained well. So I'm going to look back at the prior 3 years and see what the past audits have shown, and we may need to redo some things based on what I've heard from some local elected officials. But I agree with Paul. I believe in quantity versus quality. When I was in the enforcement section, we had complaints that came in, and Cantor's office ran it on numbers. So anything that came in, they checked it as a complaint. It didn't matter whether it was securities related or something that was Medicaid fraud. That was not what we did. Numbers did not matter. If it was something we referred out, we didn't need, or if it wasn't a complete complaint, we wouldn't list that as it, because numbers didn't matter to us. Now, I say numbers didn't matter to us, but numbers always matter, okay? That's always what they're going to go back and look at. So you still have to have your numbers up there, and you've got to have that in your mind. But I believe that quality should always trump the quantity. But I am also a very hard worker, and I believe anybody that works under me is going to be working very hard, and I believe our numbers will be very high.
Roach, you have 90 seconds about prioritizing the office.
Well, I got asked this question at a forum down in Springfield, and they actually reported my answer in the newsletter, which no one else had at the time, which is that we need to stop evaluating the state auditor based on the number of audits and evaluate the state auditor on the dollars that they scrutinize in a year. What % of government expenditures each year are you auditing? But in order to calculate a percentage, we need to know what the total government expenditures are in Missouri. We need to do the first ever budget assessment to add up all the budgets of all the 3,700 government entities so we can decide as a group what percentage are you happy with. I go to a lot of Lincoln dinners all over Missouri, and most people tell me we want 100% of government audited every year. Well, in order to deliver that, we need to modernize the operation. You can't do an audit the same way that Gerald Ford would expect it to be done. We need to be surveying all 3,700 government entities every year. What we need in the state auditor's office is an investigator who knows how to investigate and determine what to investigate. And if you're just running around doing less than 100 audits a year, you're probably not finding the most important things that need to be examined for the people. you can start asking government entities some specific question for public administrators.
David Wasinger, you have 90 seconds about prioritizing the office.
You're tough with that gavel, and I think we switched midstreams in terms of prioritizing and what my number of audits, so I'm going to try to get both of them done without you slamming that gavel too hard, John. So let me run through them. My priority, if you walk into the Office of State Auditor, I envision a banner in the office, and you see it on my Facebook page, Trust in Missouri. Trust, transparency, root out fraud and corruption. This is about you, the taxpayer. We want to watch spending and technology. So you ask what priorities are. When you walk into my office, if that would be what I envision, a banner, Trust in Missouri, because our goal is to restore trust in Jefferson City. Part of this, you'd ask about audits, how many or whatever. Possibly the most significant, huge issue, another huge issue in the state of Missouri, historic audit is going to take place. We're in St. Louis County. If you go down the road into St. Louis City, right now they're in the process of gathering signatures to have what's called a petition audit. The Office of State Auditor does not have jurisdiction over, for example, St. Louis County, which has its own auditor, or St. Louis City, unless the citizens sign a petition authorizing the audit. They're in the process of compiling that. Do you want a liberal Democrat going in and auditing the city of St. Louis starting in January of next year? I think the clear answer to that is no. That's going to be a huge priority for the state, maybe the most historic audit done in the history of Missouri in order to restore trust in the largest metropolitan area in Missouri. Thank you, John.
We will begin. Some people are contend that the auditor's office should be authorized to hire private accounting firms to increase the volume of audits that they complete. A, do you agree or disagree with that policy? And B, if you agree, how would you go about selecting the vendor? Saundra, McDowell.
I agree that they should be able to if they feel like they need to. I think we should leave that up to the auditor to decide on that, and so I'm not against it. However, I don't think they should just be able to use anybody. I think they should have to do it just like our counties do and take bids and get the lowest price. I don't believe that we should be hiring law firms that charge the max amount of $400 an hour to represent our local, any elected official or any office. That's a crazy amount of money. We don't even pay our state attorneys close to that. They get $100, around $100 an hour for the work that they do. And so I think there should be maybe a cap on how much money you can spend if you were using an outside auditor, but also just policy to take bids probably on getting the lowest priced one.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Some people believe that the auditor should be authorized to hire outside accounting firms to increase the volume of audits the office conducts. Is that a good policy or a bad policy? And if you think it's a good policy, how should the auditor go about hiring those vendors?
Okay, so I read all of Nicole Galloway's audits, appointed Nicole. They already hire outside firms to conduct audits. Dan Jones in Jefferson County is one of the biggest, I would say, ghost auditors that we have in the state of Missouri. And if you read the audits, it's on page 1 and 2. They'll say, if they hire a firm, they'll say, we hired such and such firm to conduct the financial audit, and they reviewed, the statements that were produced by the government entity, so you're trusting whatever they typed up for you. And then the state auditor's office did the performance audits. So the way they do that now is they run all those bids through the Office of Administration that Sarah Steelman runs as the Commissioner of Administration. So I think that they're going about it. They have to look at what accounting firms have, yellow book auditing experience, according to the Comptroller General of the United States. But they already, bid that out, which is really confusing to me, because you've got an $8 million budget, you've got 115 people that work there, but most of the financial audits are done by firms like Dan Jones and others across Missouri. So what in the world are the people in the office doing? 115 people, all year long and producing less than 100 audits a year, and you do hire people out. That's why we need to audit the state auditor's office, because I don't even think that they know what's going on in there.
David Wasinger, you have 90 seconds.
So the goal would be to increase the number of audits. As to hiring outside accounting firms, that would not be my first step. Here is one of the many problems wrong with the current state auditor. The current state auditor, if you recall, was appointed by Jay Nixon. She was never elected to this office. Tom Schweik passed away, and he selected a very liberal Democratic state auditor who was a delegate to Hillary Clinton to the National Convention. She's a political insider. In all likelihood, the reason she was selected by Governor Nixon is her father-in-law is a lobbyist. Her husband was a lobbyist. She is part of the problem in Jefferson City with the insider, the cronyism, the corruption. So what the current auditor has done, rather than hire competent CPAs to conduct and increase the number of audits, the Democrats had nowhere to go. The Republicans took over all statewide offices last year. So what she has done is hired a bunch of Democratic political hacks and put them on the payroll in the state auditor's office because they have nowhere to go. In terms of conducting an audit, they wouldn't know how to get out of the dugout to conduct an audit. What she's done is she wants them to stay long enough so they can fully vest their pensions. So she will hire, she is part of the problem in Jefferson City, and we need to make that change, hire competent auditors to restore trust in Missouri.
All right. Hire public vendors to increase the number of audits, not for that purpose. That could be just as wasteful as anybody else who's trying to spend money to demonstrate that they're working just to spend down their budget. I do believe, though, that the state auditor should be allowed to hire private auditors to do audits where we might need to hire private vendors for. Maybe vendors that have a particular area of expertise or some software technology that are actually going to be more enlightening to us. But I do think that the process by which we get that vendor needs some reforming. Right now, in state statute, when we're talking about how we go about finding vendors, we go with lowest and best. And a lot of times we hire people in contracts who just give us the cheapest price, and that is not always the best way to spend our money. I think for most of us, if we're going to go get medication for a serious illness, we don't just get the cheapest. We might want to get something that is actually going to have a good reputation, something that's known to work, something that doesn't have a lot of lawsuits back behind it. We had a request for a proposal for some IT work, some information technology work in Jefferson City. We went with the lowest, cheapest price, and all in all, we wound up spending about 3 times more than the original request for proposal. So that's really, really wasteful. So I think that we need to make sure that we have a bid where we actually can identify the value of the vendor that we're hiring. And also, we need to make sure that there's provisions in the contract that if they don't perform the way they're going to, and if it winds up costing us more, then that money actually comes back to the state from them. The taxpayer should not be on the hook for vendors who don't perform.
All right. I think we can squeeze in two last questions. This question is going to start with Kevin Roach. In the April quarterly campaign finance reports, Nicole Galloway reported cash on hand of $1.002 million. What is your campaign's approximate cash on hand today, and how concerned are you about the money?
Well, first of all, if money could win elections, wouldn't Hillary Clinton be our president right now? So you can't always think that that is going to appeal, to the voters. She's probably going to be needing to push her message really hard in order to win. Now, we do have a campaign finance report due on Monday. The deadline is July 16th. So we're working on getting all of those numbers together. I didn't prepare a number to come to the event, but it's an excellent question. I think that Nicole does need as much money as she can. I don't understand why she didn't approach the election differently. If she did her job the best that she could, that's the best defense, to get rehired for well, she wasn't actually hired, she was appointed. But I don't know why she's the worst auditor in 20 years. I mean, just look at the numbers, 86 audits in 2017. That's the lowest in 20 years. I mean, the way to get, I can't say reelected, but the way to get the job again is to do a good job for the people and let that be your biggest selling point.
All right, 90 seconds, David Wasinger. The question is cash on hand, and how concerned are you about her money?
First, let me tell you, I was approached by Tom Schweik's former treasurer to ask if I would run for this position. He literally cold called me and asked me to run. I've had citizens from out the state of Missouri, because I'm a CPA attorney and I've got a proven record of uncovering taxpayer fraud. I've had Republican leaders throughout the state ask me to run. And because of that support, we have raised, my primary opponents, we have over $750,000 in our campaign account. Unfortunately, it takes money to run an election. And we have a lot of donors from Cape Girardeau. Peter Kinder has endorsed me for the office. We've got a tremendous amount of support out of Springfield. Joplin, Senator Ron Richard has endorsed me. It requires a tremendous amount of effort to raise money and to run a statewide race. To my knowledge, my opponents, at least as of the campaign finance report, none of them had over $45,000 in their campaign account. In all candor, you cannot run a statewide campaign on $45,000. It's just, you may be the best person in the world, but it takes money to compete with a formidable Democratic opponent who's a CPA that has over $1 million in their campaign account. It's just the fact of life. And to my credit, I have received a tremendous amount of support from citizens throughout the state. I see some in this room who have donated to my campaign, which I'm sincerely thankful for. So I think it's symptomatic of how much support you have and how credible a candidate you are in terms of raising money.
Paul Curtman, you have 90 seconds.
Sure, thank you. I am not my campaign treasurer. I don't know how much money I actually have cash on hand right now. I'm in the black. I've got money. I don't know how much it is. But I'll tell you this. It is not true that whoever has the most money wins. And don't ever believe it. Because if that was the truth, then I wouldn't be here right now. In my very first campaign, I was outspent 3-1. There were more yard signs out for my opponent than there was for me. But what I had was a lot of people who showed up in the rain and in the snow and in the hot days when it was 105 degrees to go out and knock doors. That's how we knocked on 30,000 doors that first summer, because people got involved. There's not a single person on the face of this planet that can write a check that's more powerful than the people in this room. So please keep that in mind, and when you go to the polls, vote your beliefs and vote your conscience. Vote for the candidate that you want to support.
Thank you. I'm also not my treasurer, but I do keep up with my account, and I think I have about $2,000 in the account. But I have everything I need. I have signs that were graciously donated to me. I have T-shirts. I have push pieces. I have my work ethic, and that's what I've been using the most, is getting out and meeting all the voters and getting their support, and that's how I plan to win. I don't need TV ads. I've met these people. They know me. Everybody I talk to has talked to someone else that has met me and likes me. I don't need TV ads. I don't even watch TV. Do you all watch TV anymore? I don't listen to the radio. I have Sirius. So, I mean, you don't need money to win. You do need some. I shouldn't say that's an absolute. You do need some money. But I also think that I'm also a Christian, and I think God provides, and God has provided everything that I need, and He will continue to do that as far as He wants me to go in this race.
Last question, and we'll start this question with David Wasinger. The question is not why are you better than these other candidates. The question is why are you better to defeat Nicole Galloway than these other candidates?
Well, again, I have respect for, as you said, John, it is very difficult to run statewide, and I respect my primary opponents, and it's been, frankly, a rather cordial primary. They're feisty, formidable opponents. Trust me, they run around and they work it. They make you work. With that said, at the outset, I told you I am the only certified public accountant that's on this panel. I'm an attorney, and historically, that's what voters look for. Well, whether you like to go back to the time in the 70s at Kip on, it has always been a certified public accountant or an attorney that holds this position. As I mentioned, I have a proven record. I run a business of about 10 employees. We've got a proven record of uncovering taxpayer fraud. If you do not nominate a CPA, I can absolutely assure you that Nicole Galloway is going to make it a huge issue. I would if I was her. That, you know, voters look for that. She's a certified public accountant. That will become an issue. We also hit on the other issue, is how much support are you receiving throughout the state of Missouri? Frankly, the best barometer of that is whether or not somebody's willing to write you a $50 check, a $75 check, a $1,000 check. I have support, as I mentioned, from my hometown of Hannibal to St. Louis to Cape Girardeau, where Peter Kinder's endorsed me. Dean Plocker, who's the state representative here, is where we're sitting. Dean is endorsing my candidacy. I've received support from 3 past chairs of the Missouri Republican Party, Doug Russell, Tom Fowler, David Cole, because they want to beat Nicole Galloway and restore trust in Missouri. Now, we haven't gotten Hancock on board. We're still working on that.
Sure. I think I'm best to defeat Nicole Galloway because unless there's information that I don't know, I think I'm the only one at the table who's been attempting to work with her over the last 4 years. And I'm in a unique position. I'm a member of the state house, and I know if any of my opponents were also members of the state house, they would be able to say the exact same thing. But I've asked her over and over and over again to come down into the committees to testify in favor of bills that were a product of the audits that she did, and she wouldn't come. There's just no leadership there. These audits essentially sit on shelves and collect dust. What good does it do doing an audit if it's just going to sit there and collect dust and you can't even get a state auditor to speak with any authority to the solutions or the changes that need to be made so we can get out ahead of the problems? She hasn't been available. She hasn't been accessible. She hasn't worked with the legislature. So I think that's one reason. And the other thing, too, is because these issues that I rattled off earlier about the REMI model, how she redacted that information out of an audit according to the audits and the article that was put out last, I think, November 17th by the Missouri Times. She hasn't been honest. And I don't believe for a second that the people of Missouri are so naive to vote for somebody that they know is dishonest just because they're a CPA. I think the people in Missouri want good government. We want good elected representation. And I'm going to be able to make that case with authority because of the experience that I have attempting to work with Nicole.
All right, Saundra, McDowell, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you. I really think that I am the only candidate that has the whole package to go against Nicole Galloway and defeat her. We are both young mothers. We're both have the qualifications that I believe are necessary for the state auditor. She's a CPA. I'm an attorney. I'm a veteran. I was in the Air Force. She does not have military experience. But I also have the exact experience of the office with other agencies. And so I'm the only candidate that doesn't have to fill these gaps to try to prove to you that they could go against her and defeat her. I have letters after my name. I need those letters. I have the experience to actually go in and start working first day to take over this office, fix the office, and then go out and help fix Missouri. And so I think that I would be the best choice because honestly, I think it will be hard to defeat her if we put someone up against her who's not a CPA or an attorney. And I am a very hard worker. I have passion, integrity, and honesty, and I will go into that office and also restore trust without putting a banner up.
Well, I am the most determined person running in this race, and I'm going to keep up that determination when I'm running against Nicole Galloway. You know, I've been David in the David and Goliath story a few times in my life. You know, when I started Choose Life in Missouri, we were a very small entity, and we beat 2 of Missouri's attorney generals, Jay Nixon and Chris Koster. They both had millions and millions of dollars at their disposal. But you know what? Millions and millions of dollars. It wasn't enough. We beat them. And I already defeated a major institution in the state of Missouri. The University of Central Missouri was locking the public out of their budget documents. And I called on them to unlock their budget so that the people who pay for these institutions can see how their money is being spent. And I called on them to unlock their budget. They didn't. I walked from Baldwin to Warrensburg, 193 miles, 500,000 steps on my Fitbit, and I surprised them without an appointment, and I asked them to unlock their budget. I didn't have any authority to do it. I just had the determination. It took me 2.5 weeks to get there, and they unlocked their budget. And I don't think they're ever going to lock people out of their budget again, because they know that I know exactly where they are. I think next time, if they do, they'll respond to a phone call. But I'm on record of letting government institutions know that that's unacceptable.
Great. All right, that is, we're going to have our closing statement here in just a second. Each of the candidates will have up to 2 minutes for the closing statement. We'll go in reverse order than we started the evening. I didn't know some of these candidates very well this evening. I hope that you agree with me that we have 4 outstanding candidates for auditor. And they had some questions tonight that weren't softballs. And I appreciate you all did very, very well. I'm very proud of you. With that, we will begin with our closing statements with David Wasinger.
Thank you again to the St. Louis Young Republicans, and John, you did a wonderful job in moderating this this forum. I think this is great. We've done 3 of these now. We've done them throughout the state. We've done one in Springfield, we've done one at the Lake of the Ozarks, and now we've done one in St. Louis. So I think it gives the voters an opportunity to kind of see us and hear us and evaluate what the candidates are all about. I also failed to neglect at the outset, my mother is here today. She had a birthday, 88 years old. She probably didn't want me to say that a few days ago. So, so my mom is here. So it's birthday week. You know, I had a call. I told you I'm from Hannibal, Missouri, and someone sitting here was with me when this call took place. Someone from Macon, Missouri, which is in northeast Missouri, up by Hannibal, where I'm from, called me today, and we had looked for their support. They said, David, you know what? I would support you, but in light of what's happened in Jefferson City over the last year or so, he goes, he's a business owner, pretty good-sized business owner. He goes, I'm so repelled and disgusted by what's going on in Jefferson City, I'm no longer going to expand my plants in Missouri. I'm looking at Texas. And somebody, Catherine, can attest. I talked to him for 15 to 20 minutes, told him, listen, I don't just give me a chance and put it on an email. People have lost trust in Missouri. They've lost trust in Jefferson City. When you have a business owner from Macon, Missouri telling me that he's no longer going to expand, and Alex and Andrew will not have the same opportunities that we had growing up because of that, it's a huge problem. And it's all about people. We need to get the right people in Jefferson City. Right now, we have a liberal insider running the state auditor's office. She is part of the problem, not part of the solution. We need to restore trust in Missouri. So my 2 young sons who are sitting here, they want to stay here, and the rest of the generation, future generation of young Republicans want to stay, work, and love Missouri as I have. I've lived my entire life here, as has Colleen. So we want to restore trust. And again, thank you to the young Republicans, and thank you for attending tonight.
Well, thank you for all coming to this forum. It's going to take some very involved citizens in order to get government back under our control. I want to get all 3,700 government entity budgets online. I want the monthly expenses online so that people who are interested can get the information that they need so that they can ask questions about your money. I've traveled Missouri. I went to a few dozen Lincoln Day dinners all over Missouri, and now we're just starting on Saturday with the ice cream social circuit all over Missouri. Some places that I get to travel to I've never been to before, get to go a couple other times. It's been great. Any candidate who isn't talking about changing the status quo is really unacceptable for our next state auditor. Auditing less than 3% of government per year is absolutely unacceptable. And that's your money. You know, it takes a lot to earn money. It's time away from family, it's missed band concerts and vacations that are cut short, or maybe vacations that you never get to go on. Money is hard to come by, and sometimes government forgets that. And that's your money. You live off your paycheck, and government lives off your paycheck too. And you deserve the information. And I'm going to be working very hard to restore respect for the taxpayer, because after all, whatever money and authority government has, it came from you. And we need to restore respect for the taxpayer. And we need to modernize the operation of Missouri State Auditing Office, because we've got so much money that's being spent on government. I think $50 billion a year. And I'm the only candidate with a plan on how to track it, categorize it, analyze it, and compare it so that we can get government entities operating more efficiently. It's a lot of money, and it all comes from you. And thank you very much for attending tonight.
Thank you, and I'll echo, thank you, John. Thank you for hosting us to be here and to communicate our beliefs and answer the questions that you all have, and thank you for being here. 4 years is all you have in a term. That's not really that long. But if you elect someone who has experience that can walk in, start working in the office, get it in shape, and be able to use part of that time to do more for the state of Missouri, I think that's what we all want. We want the same thing. All of us want the same thing, but you have to look at us and see who can deliver that. Who can deliver getting the office in shape and then getting out and doing more for that office, that office can do more for Missouri. We've all gone around the state, there is tons of corruption across the state. The local elected officials are telling me about this, I guess hoping that I win and do something about it. But I'm appalled by all I can say is corruption, because it goes from northwest Missouri down to southwest Missouri over to St. Louis City, and every time I go talk to people, I hear about more. And the auditor can do things about that, because a lot of it has to do with your taxpayer funds, and we have the in. We can get in there and do the audit, do the report, work with local law enforcement, prosecutors, FBI, to get that corruption out of our state. Our court systems, they need audited. The cities need audited. There is so much going on in Missouri that any elected official should be concerned about. We have sex trafficking, we have drugs. If you get in there and you find it and you know where to look, you can do something about it. And I promise you, I will do something about it. I'm asking for your vote August 7th. A vote for me is a vote really to move Missouri forward in the right direction and to fight corruption. Thank you.
State Representative Curtman.
Thank you, John. Thank you to the Young Republicans and for everybody that came tonight. And also, thank you to my wife, Ruth, who's sitting back there, who I think this might be the first event she's actually been able to make it to. She's been watching the kids with my, what's that? She might have been to one. She certainly went to our Lincoln Day in Franklin County. But I'm really glad that she was able to join us here tonight. We're going to pick up some ice cream on the way back and drive back slowly. I also want to thank my opponents. I want to thank my opponents for their ideas. I said at the outset of this, iron sharpeneth iron, and I think every time we've had an opportunity to have one of these particular events, I feel like I've learned something. And I think that that's good. And I also want to thank my supporters, and those of you here who are going to be my supporters after tonight. If any of you are going to do that, I would greatly appreciate your support. I understand that when we have campaigns, there are people who contribute their time, their energy, and their fortunes to help somebody get elected that they believe in. And when people do contribute to our campaigns, I know my opponents do that. That's not our money. That's somebody else's money. And certainly we're trying to be as efficient as we can with the energy and the treasure that people are offering to us in order to help take our state back, especially in this office. I believe that we have a state auditor who is just not honest. Over and over and over again, she's proven that she's willing to be deceitful, whether it's with county commissioners in Greene County or with the entire public at large when she's repackaging audits and redacting certain parts of information to withhold information from the people. Please go to paulcurtman.com You send me an email through there. You can ask me any question. I want to be available and accessible. You can find me on Facebook and Twitter also, but I'd greatly appreciate your support. Thank you.
We started at exactly 7 o'clock. It is now 8:32. Not bad at all. Thank you all very much for your interest and attendance. God bless you, and God bless you, Keith.